Perlich, new book, Wild Times.
Proust, to me, means making it work, making it pay off, work with it. His life, to him, was useless, I think, until he started writing. And the most important thing for this whole project with me was learning that I didn't know the name of Proust's novel. Remembrances of Things Past is completely wrong, as you know, and In Search of Lost Time is what he was. He was in search of lost time. He was trying to redeem himself by writing. And so am I. So it doesn't take much of a leap for me. He's my hero. Jack was writing all the time, and Jack makes this point about Proust. He says, well, I'm like Proust, except Proust was dying, and he was sitting in a room. I'm doing it in the moment. He was like a Zen, Zen writer.
Right.
And his whole style of writing. If you look at the way Proust writes, these gigantic constructs, you've seen that.
Yes.
They start out in a little cahier, right, and then they go to this size.
Right.
He keeps pasting things out
together.
Exactly right. But Jack is just like sitting there like that.
But remember, Kerouac put those rolls. I mean, Kerouac had his own design. He was putting those rolls into his typewriter, and then the endless things. He wasn't writing pages. He was just writing rolls. So that was very Proustian in its own way.
But it was also the exact opposite of Proust, because he was writing it in the moment while he was doing it. Proust was reflecting upon it. And so Jack is sitting there processing life through this endless roll, which is, again, a very Buddhist concept, which is the impermanence and constant change of things. And Jack is doing that, And Proust is going, if I just get this down, I can die in peace, And, I mean, that's my concept. And that's what's so meaningful to me as a writer. I mean, I don't know how important that is to anybody who's not a writer. You have an internal opponent, but you also have an internal voice that's not your opponent. That's your muse somehow, and they're both there, and maybe they're just the flip. One is the flip of the other, but to speak to that and say, "I've done it," le temps retrouvé, right? Retrouvé, he regained it. He'd lost it. I mean, temps perdu. He'd lost the time. Here's a man living with the concept that his life was lost, that he had lost the opportunity, the chance to do something. He published a couple of books, sort of...
And they're pretty awful.
Exquisite books in the Oscar Wilde sense. He was a dandy, and he didn't write very well. I mean, that's the judgment of others. I'm certainly not sitting in judgment of others. But...
he wasn't Proust yet.
Boy, and when you're not Proust,
Yeah.
you're like the rest of us.
Yeah, well, he was like the rest of us. Which is kind of the beauty of this thing.
It is.
The struggle.
The transformation.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly. That's very good.
We're at the end, when he does slip on the stones and he starts getting a sense of involuntary memory and a sense that the outside is all within himself.
He comes from the sanatorium and comes back to the party.
Right. And everybody's gray.
And he thinks he thinks this is a costume party. He thinks it's a costume. Why? Everyone is dressed as old people. I mean, it's such a canard, But that's really it. And to write about your life see, what you get from both of them is their Jack Kerouac was thought of by some as like some kind of something out of the Wild Ones, or something like King of the Beats, someone with a leather jacket and a lot of macho and drunk and a lot of women and all that. And he was the tenderest, hardest person of all. I mean, he and Proust both. And they also have that they're willing to look inside themselves and say, why am I doing this,
And just as on the day when I dipped the Madeleine into the hot infusion, in the setting of the place in which I happened to be at the time, whether it was, as on that day, my bedroom in Paris, or today at this moment the Duc de Guermant's library, or a little earlier the courtyard of his mansion, there had come to me, irradiating a little zone around me, a sensation, the taste of the dipped Madeleine, the metallic sound, the feel of my footsteps, which was common to both the place in which I was and another place, my Aunt Leonie's room, the railway carriage, the baptistry of St. Mark's. And at the very moment I was thinking about this, the strident sound of a water pipe, exactly like those long whistles with which the pleasure steamers at Baalbek sometimes disturbed the evening air, made me feel, as it had once done in Paris in a large restaurant, at the sight of a luxurious dining room half empty, summery and hot, something much more than a sensation simply analogous to the one I felt in the late afternoon at Baalbek, when all the tables were already set with their linen and silverware, the vast glazed bay windows wide open onto the sea wall, without any boundary at all, without a single interruption of glass or stone, as the sun set slowly on the sea where the ships were beginning to sound their horns. And in order to join Albertine and her friends who were walking on the sea wall, I had only to step over the wooden frame, hardly higher than my ankle, through which the continuous glass windows slid open to ventilate the hotel.
And what we were talking about is why this stuff is important as an artist. Why?
As an artist,
not what I can't judge it literary. I mean,
right. How it inspired me,
and how it adds, fire to the.
Completely. Well, to me, there are the people that do this, that write about themselves. Bukowski, as I was saying, Orwell, Isherwood, and Miller too.
Yeah.
Those people are the ones that I find inspiring because that's all I have. I'm limited to what they're limited.
And I never felt most of them. I never felt, even though they're writing about from their lives, I didn't feel the indulgence. Especially in Proust's case, everything was changed, so he wasn't. Many characters form one character, many streets formed one street. We're not.
Proust is the master of that. My view is that you can tell your actual story, as Jack did, basically, and change the names, and Bukowski did, and change the names, and it's still art. What the art inheres in is the writing and the way of telling it, the narrative craft. Whether it comes from whether it's like in music, if you take variations on a theme by somebody else, and people tend to expect you to believe that it's somehow a lesser art form. Which to me is idiotic. I mean, that's all jazz is playing, all blue, or blue and green, or around midnight, or whatever else, over and over and over and over and over. It's the way you play it that counts. Not the fact that it's a song that was written by Thelonious Monk who's been dead 30 years, but, what are you doing now with it?
What are you doing now?
Right, exactly. What is the effect that it's going to have? What it's not even what you're doing with it. What is the result of what you're doing with it? And how will that affect somebody else and make them live a better life or richer and being rich, whatever, whatever blah, blah, woof, woof you're looking for as you're going in your piece. But I'm a little defensive about that because, of course, I've written very close to my life. Not as close as Proust because Proust is off. Except I think his character is his character. Except that he's a homosexual, of course.
Right,
and Albertine is a whole
other thing, and so it didn't always work.
And the mother and the grandmother and those kinds of things sort of went in and out of focus.
Right. I was talking today about how he used camera angle, how it was so cinematic, his writing, and how he took people, he had long shots of people. You remember when he first meets the girls in Baalbek, and he's got this vision, and he can't reconcile one angle with the close-up. And
it's a very, very visual book. Almost everything is set like that. Like the scenes at Baalbek are amazing. And looking at the sea and
the light coming in through the windows.
And the balls that he goes to are incredibly well described. I mean, I just give up when I look at that kind of writing. I mean, he's describing every moment, and Charlus is passing through. But it's the salvation, and it's why do we want to save ourselves? Why do we think that we need to do this? Why do I have to do this? Why do you have to? I mean, why does anybody have to do it?
Because the work of art is the true last judgment. That's what he says.
Yeah, maybe.
Proust is an adventure. Like as is Kerouac went on an adventure. Proust went on an adventure in terms of a creative adventure, a writing adventure, and I am imagining. I have these imaginings of Proust 5, 6, 7 years into this project in his room, drinking that espresso and visualizing, all those pages spread out into one long movie in his head. When What do you think? It probably took him 5, 6, 7 years before he could really start to see the whole thing as a piece of malleable art.
Incomprehensible. Yeah, it may be that kind of chunk of time. It's incomprehensible.
I mean, he was
the achievement is so incredible.
so deep into this thing, and so crystalline. So crystalline in a cinematic vision that might have been coming in front of his mind.
You mean the architecture plus the actual way that it actually
the architecture plus deep into he was he was very alive. He was living in that book. You have to live it. Running, knocking down a window here, carpeting a thing there, cooking something here.
He's there. And the other thing is, it happens in Swann's Way, and you can stop reading for right there for this, and that's the remembrances he has as a little boy, sitting in a chair, a wicker chair, I think, a lawn chair, and reading and thinking, why am I reading, and what good is it? And he says he came to the conclusion, I think he was about 9, that you could know a person really, really, really well, like your mother, but you still wouldn't know what you'd know about her if you read a novel about her. The beginning and end of the book, and the rest of it, of course, is just, it's so good you start thinking, like, really soon, I'm going to be done with this pretty soon, and I'm not going to know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
Like in the second book already, you're going, oh God, this is really good,
Yeah, it's going to end.
Right, exactly.
It's like, how can you explain a 1,400-page book that it was too short? That you were just getting started, that he didn't explain enough, and those 20-page paragraphs were too short.
When it's right, it's right. I mean, the length is like just an afterthought in any case.
Right.
It takes the shape that it takes, and then you come and look at it.
Right.
It's not. You're not telling it to take that shape.
Is it saying what you wanted to
Yeah.
say?
Does it work? And every single sentence that I've ever read of Proust works brilliantly. I mean, the phrases are in place. Everything refers to itself. I mean, it all works out and so forth. And they're not, I used to think they would be labored somehow. But other than the first couple of 100 pages of Swann's Way, which requires a great deal of concentration, you have to tell anybody. I have a friend who's reading it now, actually. She borrowed my copy of Swann's Way. I said, look, 200 pages.
Or
trust me.
The first 100 pages.
At least.
The first 100 pages are rough.
Yeah.
And it seems nothing's happening. Well, it's all happening. You'll find out the second time you read it, the third time, the fourth time, you'll keep seeing there's more, it's all really happening.
It's all like ba-ba-ba-bam. It's all contained in that. It's all going to expand over.
Yeah, every bit of it
27
expands.
minutes worth of symphony, and at the end of it, it's going to pay off. But you have to
do the work.
You have to do the work. You go to hear some new music, and you have to make an effort. You have to go to, an opera and read the libretto first, or you have to go to a movie and find out what's going on in it first. But people don't often do that. And I think when Proust puts the test to you, are you going to make, are you going to hunker down on this or not, And most people don't. I mean, everyone says, oh, I have it next to my bed. And
yeah.
We had someone at dinner who said that the other night, I have it next to my bed. And I kept trying to read it, and I can't read it. Well, I understand that, because I did the same thing. But finally, when the time came, I did it.
And the experience that you and I had together was one of the great experiences of my life.
Oh,
and
me too.
That was
great. Yeah.
That was really fun. And I suggest people do find someone to go through this experience with.
You're right. It's wonderful to share, because there's so many juicy moments.
I mean, we were on the phone every night.
That's right.
Can you believe this?
That's right.
What does this mean?
Just as I was signalling to a cabman, I had caught sight of the famous Professor E., almost a friend of my father and grandfather, acquainted at any rate with them both, who lived in the Avenue Gabriel, and with a sudden inspiration had stopped him just as he was entering his house, thinking that he would perhaps be the very person to advise my grandmother. Well, as I am a friend of your people, if your grandmother comes here at once, I will see her. But I warn you that I shall be able to give her exactly a quarter of an hour, not a moment more. I helped my grandmother into Professor E.'s lift, and a moment later he came to us and took us into his consulting room. But there, busy as he was, his bombastic manner changed, such is the force of habit, for his habit was to be friendly, that is to say lively, with his patients. Since he knew that my grandmother was a great reader, and was himself one also, He devoted the first few minutes to quoting favourite passages of poetry appropriate to the glorious summer weather. His examination was minute and thorough, even obliging me at one moment to leave the room. He continued it after my return, then, having finished, went on, although the quarter of an hour was almost at an end, repeating various quotations to my grandmother. He even made a few jokes, which were witty enough, though I should have preferred to hear them on some other occasion, but which completely reassured me by the tone of amusement in which he uttered them. After which he took out his watch, wrinkled his brows petulantly on seeing that he was 5 minutes late, and while he bade us good-bye, rang for his other coat to be brought to him at once. I waited until my grandmother had left the room, closed the door, and asked him to tell me the truth. "There is not the slightest hope," he informed me. "It is a stroke brought on by uremia."